Everyone knows the early industrialists were rich, but almost no one knows the exact corporate loophole they used in the Gilded Age to crush their competitors legally. Today we're opening the actual monopoly playbook. What you're about to hear is how a handful of men built empires so large they swallowed entire industries. And the strangest part is that their most powerful weapons were never bribery or threats. They were paperwork. This playbook ran 3 pages deep, and we're going to read every one of them, but the story only makes sense once you understand who we're dealing with. John D. Rockefeller stepped into the Cleveland oil refining business back in 1863, and by 1870, he had incorporated the Standard Oil Company in Ohio. Here's the number that tells you everything. By 1880, Standard Oil controlled the refining of 90 to 95% of all the oil produced in the United States, which wasn't a large slice of the market, it was nearly the whole thing. To put a face on money like that, consider that Rockefeller's fortune crested around 1913 at roughly $900 million, equal to about 2.5% of the entire American economy that year. Translate that into today's money, and the inflation-adjusted estimates land somewhere between $300 and $600 billion. The question that drives everything else is simple. How do you climb from one refinery to owning almost an entire industry and stay inside the law the whole way? You follow the playbook. Page 1 comes down to controlling a cost your competitors can't touch. During the early 1870s, Rockefeller's interests were tied to an outfit called the South Improvement Company, a cartel of railroad executives and large refiners whose mechanism was brutal in its elegance. Members collected rebates on their own shipping costs, which by itself is just a bulk discount. The second piece is what turned it vicious. Through something called the drawback, members also pocketed a cut of their competitors' freight charges, which meant that every time an independent refiner shipped a single barrel of oil, part of what they paid flowed straight to the people working to destroy them. Picture rivals funding your growth while paying for their own funeral. That cost gap could not be closed, and it didn't matter how lean or efficient an independent refiner managed to be, because they simply could not win. History keeps an honest debate alive here, and it's worth respecting. The traditional view, championed by journalist Ida Tarbell, holds that these were predatory tactics built to crush rivals. Later academic work pushes back, arguing that discriminatory railroad rates were common at the time, frequently legal, and partly a reflection of genuine efficiency, since Rockefeller could promise the railroads enormous, dependable volume. Both readings can be true at once. The scheme gutted its targets either way. Here's the twist that exposes just how raw this first tactic really was. Once the South Improvement Company surfaced in early 1872, the public backlash detonated. Oil producers refused to sell to it, and the railroads tore up their contracts that March. By April, Pennsylvania had revoked its charter, and the company never collected a single rebate before the crude version of the playbook fell apart. That collapse is exactly why page 2 had to get smarter. Page 2 was about hiding the empire inside a legal fiction. By 1882, Rockefeller's people assembled the Standard Oil Trust, which on paper looked like nothing more than an arrangement where stockholders from dozens of separate companies handed their shares to a small circle of trustees who then ran the whole operation as one coordinated machine. 9 trustees signed that agreement, and Rockefeller alone held more than a third of the certificates. The brilliance of the trust lived entirely in the law. State rules at the time restricted how far a company could reach across state lines, which meant the trust became the workaround, letting one central group quietly steer companies in different states without ever technically forming one giant illegal company. As Ida Tarbell put it, you could argue its existence from its effects, but you could not prove it. And that opacity was the entire point of a monopoly nobody could quite put a finger on. None of that permanence lasted, because in 1892, the Ohio Supreme Court ordered the trust dissolved. If the story stopped there, this would be a video about a system that worked. Yet the dissolution of that trust is precisely what carried Rockefeller toward the third and most powerful page of all. Page 3 is the New Jersey loophole. Across 1888 and 1889, the state of New Jersey passed laws that did something genuinely revolutionary by legalizing one corporation owning the stock of another. That sounds painfully boring on the surface. It also happens to be the single most important sentence in this entire video. New Jersey wrote those laws on purpose, hoping to lure trusts from across the country into reincorporating there, and the gamble paid off spectacularly. What emerged was the modern holding company, a parent corporation that simply owns the others, fully and openly legal. And by 1899, Standard Oil of New Jersey had become exactly that, the holding company sitting on top of the whole empire. This stopped being one man's clever trick and turned into the template for an entire economy. Between 1895 and 1904, 167 holding groups absorbed more than 1,800 separate companies and ended up commanding over 40% of all American manufacturing capital, a stretch history now calls the Great Merger Movement. The Playbook had gone industry-wide. The crowning prize landed in 1901, when financier J.P. Morgan fused Carnegie Steel together with two other firms to create U.S. Steel. Around $480 million is what the purchase from Andrew Carnegie cost. Capitalized at $1.4 billion, this new giant became the first billion-dollar corporation the world had ever seen, churning out roughly 2/3 of America's steel. If the Playbook proved this effective, a fair question follows. Why don't we live under these same monopolies today? The law eventually pushed back, though never as cleanly as you'd hope. By 1911, the Supreme Court had broken Standard Oil into dozens of companies. And here's the irony that defines the whole era. That breakup actually enriched Rockefeller, because the combined value of the successor companies climbed sharply, and those descendants grew into giants you still know today, names like ExxonMobil and Chevron. The empire fractured, and the man who built it walked away wealthier than before. The law's response carried a loophole of its own. That same 1911 decision established what's known as the rule of reason, the idea that not every monopoly is automatically illegal, only the unreasonable ones. 1920 pushed it even further, when the Supreme Court ruled in a case against U.S. Steel that mere size is not an offense, declaring that the law demands overt acts rather than punishing bigness on its own. The result was that even after the trust-busting era, being enormous remained perfectly legal all by itself. That's the real Playbook. And notice what it never required. Not crime, not secrecy, just a railroad rebate, a trust agreement, and one quiet change to a single state's incorporation law. 3 pieces of paper let a handful of men build the largest empires the economy had ever produced, and pull off nearly all of it within the law. The question the courts wrestled with a century ago, whether sheer size is a crime by itself or only when you abuse it, never truly got settled, and it's the exact same fight playing out over the biggest companies in the world right now. The Playbook is still open.